Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this session. We're going to share with you some transformative approaches in the industry. My name is Sanjay Singh. I am the CEO of Onix, and I have the privilege of leading Onix as one of the Google Cloud's premier partner. How many times in your lifetime do you get to participate and know an innovator is going to change the world? Raise your hands. So today, with Canoo and with Tony, what it's trying to do is going to change the game in the world in terms of how transportation industry works forever. And I always believe one of my ethos when I do businesses with leaders across the world is that not only what the leader does in terms of business, but who he really is. And Tony, I've known Tony for the last many months, and Tony's approach to doing business is very different than many other people I've seen out there. Tony has a do it different approach when it comes to innovation. He believes in using nature, reverence for nature in the designs that he built. And just today, when I was talking to Tony in the afternoon, he told me why the Canoo's car shape is the way it is, how the square shapes are the least secure shapes in the world, and how it leads to a lot of accidents and fatalities in the industry. And Tony is going to share with us as to how is the building Canoo into the next generation platform, a fantastic platform design. I had the opportunity of spending a lot of time with Tony, and Tony is an innovator. He has innovated many industries in the past, aerospace, cybersecurity, and software. And one of the common themes that he uses across all of these is he uses data and the amount of data which the businesses generates to drive business and outcomes and transform industries. He has done multi-billion-dollar exits. He also runs his own AFP Ventures, which is a capital venture. And lastly, Tony, I also want to share with you a small anecdote story. Is that many of us as leaders, we talk about doing good for society. And going to do for society, we can do it in three ways. We can do it by doing financial help, we can do it by giving time, or we can join initiatives and enable people to do great things in society. Tony does all three. And one of the examples that I remember Tony from our conversations last time was that in his Jackson Hole Ranch, is that he conducts inspirational sessions for specially able children to achieve the dreams that they want to achieve in life. And it touched me in many ways, and it kind of stayed with me. So I welcome Tony on stage to share his story and to share as to what he's doing with Canoo. Please, Tony, welcome to the stage. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Tony. I'm a typical entrepreneur. Actually grew up not far from here in San Pablo, Oakland, Richmond area, and started my first tech company down here. I grew up in what they call the Silicon Ghetto, over there on the other side. And it was a pretty inspirational place, actually, which is where most of my tech ideas came from. And like many of you which have invented tech, you're inspired by something in your childhood. And so I believe everybody should have a chance. I never went past the 9th grade, and that was actually one of the best experiences for me. And it inspired me to learn how to do things differently. And so what I did is I started to think back to when I lived in the ghetto. What was it like, you know? Thank you. So I basically tried to democratize and bring transparency to things that were generating fraud or bad behavior. That's how I started. I have a passion for things that go fast. And so I love aviation and automotive. And do you know this, that the minute you bring mobility to a new environment, the income of that household will go up 25 times in 1 year. When we went into Africa and we helped get mobility in there 25 times, because otherwise their ecosystem was so small and it was captive. And so they never really had the ability for capitalism. So mobility is really an inspiring space. And it's intersecting today with it. Oh, by the way, there's a disclaimer thing up here from the lawyers. So just let those guys do their thing. But my passion was, like, think of the working people in the world, right? If you grow up in the ghetto, you see people struggle, you see people hungry, you see people steal, not because they steal, but because sometimes they have to steal. And so you have a different perspective. But do you realize the working people drive the oldest cars, which have terrible gas mileage and have more cost per mile? And they're the people who work, right? Like, they don't sit at a desk, they're out there moving earth. They're doing whatever they're doing. And so, like, why does the EV world have to be for rich dudes that don't wear socks? Instead, like, what about the working guy? And so in order to do that, you have to democratize the vehicle, because the vehicle is a whole bunch of stuff that's bolted together that is never designed to come apart. And in fact, they want to keep selling you more of it when you only need to replace some of it. How many of you sold your car in the past because you were tired of the infotainment system? Or you wanted better safety features, all that. That should be upgradable. Now, to do that, you can't be an OEM. You have to become a TEM, which is a technology-driven environment, because technology democratizes. It gets rid of stuff and it makes it more cognitive. So to make it affordable, we had to invent a platform, just like all of you in tech do. And that platform has to be able to take any shape, form on top of it. Now, we went with round because your eyes are round and they're not square. Your head's round. So when you build something round, it actually is going to use you better. So the person is mine. So it's very human-centric design. But the purpose of this platform is so that you never have to go and get another chassis. You just get a new top hat like you get a new coat. And that will create the first near new market. But for third world countries and other environments that are mobilizing, that makes it democratized for financing, because you could put 20-year financing on that chassis and 5 years on the top hat. The world will change, and for the better. Now, you can't think like an OEM, because then you just want to push steel and volume. What we want to do is actually create the near new market and let every vehicle be modifiable to you. Like, if you went out and saw the vehicle, you'd see that your body never moves more than 30%. Why? Because anything beyond that is going to cause a workman's comp or an injury or something like that. Ingress, egress, the basic things. So the multi-purpose platform, now, the big passion was let somebody get a chassis and have what we call the MPP1, and it can go from military grade to adventure grade to fleet grade. It just doesn't matter. It's just a top hat. It takes less than 6 hours to change it, because it's the first vehicle that drives by wire, brakes by wire. It's harmonized and articulated. It's built with 1,600 parts, not 10,000. It has very few parts. And it resembles the spinal cord in its design, in the way the electrical system works. This happens to be called the American Bulldog. This is for military silent watch. And the Bulldog is on the exact same chassis that you saw out there, but notice its clearance. It's also very cognitive in the sense that the sensors, so we wanted the sensors to be upgradable, so you don't have to buy a new vehicle when you don't want to, but yet you can still go in and get the latest and greatest stuff. It's a very different way of thinking about it. And this stuff will only get more and more intelligent as time goes on. In fact, as we work with the Google team, we ingest so much data because everything is connected on the vehicle because it is signals. It's driving by wire. It's braking by wire. It's regen. It's like if your butt came off the seat, it would go into park. So it's super intelligent for safety and for environmental reasons. So what we focused on was being able to meet fleet grade, military grade, and then consumer grade. Fleets are the most abusive. They pump a lot of data, so you need to have a cognitive platform that speaks to the user. And that's where, for us, finding a partner that could process what we can throw is demonstrous compared to a normal vehicle. So typical vehicle, like today people are thinking of AI, like I'm gonna come in today and I'm gonna ask, what vehicles do I need to pay attention to if I'm the manager of a fleet? Or, somebody who's managing a military deployment. Instead, we're thinking more towards the cognitive layer where actually when you come in, it's already done most of those steps for you, and then it tells you the steps it can't do rather than what you should do. So we're moving it to a very different space in the cognitivity. And of course, you can't do that unless you can process data. 80% of all the repairs on this vehicle are done over the air. The only thing we change is tires, shocks. That's about it. And those chassis will run for 1 million miles. It's our own battery technology, which is all signaled to each single cell. This is the future of mobility. So whether the vehicle takes a form of a consumer's life or a fleet life or a military's life, the platform is designed to adapt to their environment. We just throw bunches of data. It's a control tower. We built the vehicles for NASA. So the first 8 miles of every launch is the most important 8 miles, as Charlie Blackwell will say. And she runs launch. And she's a brilliant individual and an amazing American, very inspiring. But we developed a vehicle that gets those astronauts those 8 miles before they get in, because nothing can go wrong. And working with them was a tremendous privilege to be able to do that. And we learned so much about the ergonomics of a body through NASA, right? Because when you think about what they go through. And all of this, they ingest a whole bunch of data. They're just data hounds. And we really meshed, and the vehicles we built for them are very cool. But here's a video, and then we can just have questions and other dialogue you guys want to talk about rather than hearing me talk about this. But here's a video which just kind of gives you a visual of how you just do everything digitally. You don't, like facial recognition, no keys, nothing. Your daughter drives the vehicle. You can reduce the horsepower. Your son drives it. You can reduce it even more. So, you could do like just anything, right? Like today you hand the keys, your kid takes your SRT, you're like, oh crap. What's going to happen? It's going to be wrapped around a tree. This thing is so cognitive. It's such a beautiful thing. And to democratize it brings it to the masses. And that's our big passion. And here's a little video.
So I would like to welcome on stage Garrett and Ben from Google Cloud. Please give them a big round of applause.
Where do you want me to sit? Right here? Okay. Anywhere? Okay.
Sure. Please. So, let's have a quick round of introductions from Garrett and Ben, please.
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm Garrett. I'm the General Manager and Vice President of Google Data Analytics.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Royce. I'm on the AI services team building custom models for Google Cloud customers.
Thank you. And we all know Tony now. So, Tony, I have only one question for you in one word. When can I have it?
This year. If you pay a lot of money, maybe move it up a little bit.
And question for Garrett, as Canoo expands these data-driven strategies, it's amazing to see the subsystems which is so flexible. I love the idea that I can tell my son to go only 20 miles an hour on this car. How would you recommend Canoo and in the general industry that they should be building a data-driven architecture enterprise? What are the best practices that you would advise this panel on?
You know, I think a great example is actually of Canoo, which is transferable to any industry. And this is, you got to think about data differently. You know, the way Google thinks about data, I think, is differently in the same mindset as Canoo does. If you understand, you know, data being your key strategic asset, right, which drives all of your logic, all of your cognitive intelligence, all of your AI models, and this is the hard part, right? You do have to get to a point where you can interconnect all of your data, right? We heard the example about all of the data the vehicle generates and having a platform which can hold it. The reason why Google Cloud looks the way it does is because, well, Google, you know, a while back had a gigantic data processing challenge, right? How can we index all the web? How can we have intelligent search across that? How can we serve that in milliseconds latency? And that created a new unique networking fabric, unique infrastructure. You heard this morning about TPUs and all of that, and unique software systems like BigQuery and Dataflow and many of the services Canoo is using. And the challenge is that before I hand it back to you, the big challenge is that is not how organizations operate. There is a big difference, right? In economics, decentralization is great, independent teams, independent decisions, independent execution. In a data-centric and AI-centric world, centralization is great. So you have two opposing forces in organizations that kind of work against each other. And the trick is how you reconcile them in a way so you can centralize all your data and still have independence in your business execution.
Thank you, Garrett. Ben, when all this data is moving back and forth and we're using different LLM models, maybe in the future you will use Vertex AI for organic models and then partner models. How do we secure the data across when you start using AI from Canoo's perspective? What's the best practices that we should be working on?
The biggest concern I've seen, especially with the rise of generative AI, is the data security aspect. And it's because we kind of have been testing it as a consumer model. Like, you want to make a haiku. It's cool. Like, it works really well. It does unusually, the image models do really well with watercolors for some reason. It's really good at watercolors. That's not really an enterprise application, at least at scale, right? So when you have an enterprise level environment, that data stays in your GCP account. It's the number one question I get at generative AI events is are you going to use my data? No. Is it going to leak somehow? Not unless you leak it, that sort of thing. So it's really important to take it seriously from an enterprise security perspective. And I think that's actually a little bit of a mistake that I think the whole generative AI community made, is we went consumer first, wowed everyone, and then, of course, the enterprise started playing with consumer models, and that's where we kind of ran into trouble. So we built the the generative AI stuff in Vertex and GenApp Builder and the APIs in the cloud environment, so your data stays there, it's secure. And what's kind of cool, one of the first issues that we had, which turned out not to be an issue, was I had a customer tell me, by the way, I'm getting different answers from this large language model than my coworker is. That's not good. I need reliability. And I was like, look at the access controls. You as the CTO have access to every document pretty much in the company if you want it. This other guy didn't have that access. And of course, the answer should be different, right? And I showed him that his answer was worse and your answer was amazing, right? That's because you have access to all the answers that you should. So it wasn't a bug. It was a feature. And you kind of design it that way in the enterprise world.
And especially it's true for Canoo because Canoo's requirements is even more stringent because they cater to both consumer side and on the defense side as well, right?
Yeah.
And I remember me and Tony talking about in the initial days about hardening of the security strategies and then things like that. Garrett, going back to you, when we talk to enterprises, I see this business wants to move very fast on a data-driven architecture. IT is stuck in its old ways and because of issues. What are the best practices that you have seen to align both of them so that business can move forward at the speed at which the founders would like to move?
Right. That's a big question, actually. So I hope we have 2 or 3 hours on this panel. Look, I think a lot of starts with the right culture and mindset. It sounds benign, but actually it's a pretty big deal. Many companies, I think, still understand data as a secondary asset. So they live in the process world and, it generates data and they give it into a system. And, someone really smart looks at this data and then, kind of improves the business. And that's really a very dated way of looking and understanding value creation. Again, going back to Tony and the Canoo example, right? If you really look at it, right, it's technology and data playing with each other, generating the majority of the value, right? And classical business processes, and the way we traditionally conceive them, are maybe things which are being executed at the tail end of that, but they're not leading anymore, right? And I think, understanding that the technology platform, the data platform, is the primary piece in your value generation, and everything stems after this. This is the first step. And I think the second step is really rethinking the way how business and technology interfaces, right? This IT business, split, I think, doesn't really work anymore, right? Because technology is a part of all business functions. AI permeates in every business function as well. So the superior organization models are, those embedded models, right? Where technology functions are a part of every business, and there is no unhealthy division of the two.
Right. Great, thank you for that. And Tony, as we put your manufacturing plants together and you deploy this, could you share with the audience as to what does your manufacturing strategy look like?
Yeah. So ironically, so this vehicle is round. If you go out and look at ours, in addition to that, I wanted to really understand how did America win World War II when we didn't have the best equipment? Does anybody know what was the number one thing that helped us win? It was the Quonset hut, because we could pop a factory up in days, weeks. And how many of y'all come from some place where there's terrible weather? I know you guys experienced it for 1 year, but like a Quonset hut is still standing because it's like the cord of an aircraft wing. So I was thinking to myself, everybody keeps talking about being like Ford or Porsche. I want to be like Henry and Ferdinand. And so we figured out how to democratize the factory to build it in very small increments so your CapEx scales. And we decided to build it in Native America because these are people which actually understand the land, right? This is a whole thing we got in with them. So we're building it in Oklahoma. We're bringing it to the heartland and their amazing workforce. And it's great to be able to use this technology. Like we just opened a sophisticated battery manufacturing site in Pryor, Oklahoma, in the Cherokee Nation near Tahlequah. And with AI, we can train those workers. They just put on the glasses because you cannot mess up when you're messing with these. This is near, nuclear grade stuff. So, and we were able to train these people that have a 9th grade education just like me. And that's the power of making it super intelligent. So I would just say, more data, the better.
There was a really good book a number of years back called The Ecology of Commerce that really changed my view on a lot of this. And it's about manufacturing and like how you can the byproduct of your product should be your next product. It would help you have better margins on your second product. It was about manufacturing and things like that. This actually totally applies to the data world too. So if you have a process, and for example, in AI we have outputs that data scientists look at for 5 seconds and go, cool, good, bad, and they toss it, and they never show it to anyone. And I've had a number of executives that have come to me being like, I'll ask them, what percentage of your price is driven by whatever, some business process? And they'll say, about 30. I'm like, you should know exactly what that number is. Your AI models are already telling you every day, right? That down to the, tiny percentage, like, double-digit decimals. And you can use that to inform your decisions. So you can use the byproduct of your data to get, better decisions at the least, if not more impressive processes.
But to Ben's point on this, that like the vehicle should underwrite itself. So in other words, today you go buy a used vehicle, you don't know what you're getting. But this vehicle, because it's a TEM, not an OEM design, it underwrites itself. It tells you the wear and tear of the vehicle. So it prices itself. Like, you don't have to know these things. What you have to do is make sure the data is your asset manager. And that's how I see the whole EQ of data, not just the IQ of it.
Fantastic. So and one of the things which also Tony is very passionate about, and the way to design is that normal cars have about how many 10, 15,000 parts, Tony? You want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah. So one of the things, when you become a TEM, you start with tech. Tech is like vapor, like everything is possible, right? So now you just have to figure out how to make it. And we have this positive violence between hardware and processing when you're in tech, right? So it's either not fast enough, it overheats, it's not available lately. And so, there's this positive violence that's occurring, but tech is driving the elimination of stuff. Think of your phone. Like, how many things does it do? You'd have a phone book, you'd have a freaking dial phone, you'd have all these things, a flashlight, all that stuff. It's all in one. Like, that's the future of everything.
Fantastic. And I remember that normal cars are like 15,000 parts. A Canoo car has 1,600 parts. Look at the impact on recycling and sustainability and carbon footprint. Even that aligns with the overall mission that Google and Canoo drive together from a sustainability.
And the recyclability, everything on the vehicle is harvestable. Even the battery, we can harvest 98% of it. So, like, thinking through that, it takes young, very disruptive minds, we call them do-it-different minds, to do it, because we're defying the system, which means, you get punched in the face every day. But there comes a day when it's like everybody's idea. And that's the day you just quietly enjoy it.
So Garrett, as you look into the future in your role as the head of Google's data analytics, what are I know a lot of things got shared today, but in your vision, what do you think are the upcoming trends in data analytics that Canoo can incorporate into their strategy as they look forward on this journey?
Yeah, of course. I mean, generative AI is a pretty big deal in surprising ways, not just to write haikus and poems. My wife wrote Christmas cards with it, last Christmas, very successful. But there is actually more than you can do with it, right? Because, what is the most data out there today? Unstructured data, right? All of the data was inaccessible because it is so hard to analyze unstructured data, voice, images, videos, documents, it doesn't matter, it's really difficult. Gen AI is amazing at that. Think about, your company, how much unstructured data you have and what it can tell you about your process, your customer, your employee, your suppliers. All of that will be immediately accessible through the power of Gen AI, and it's going to change the way what we think of as our data platform. Second thing is amazing new features, recommendation queries, text analysis, sentiment analysis. All of that stuff is easily accessible, again, through Gen AI models and vector embeddings, so a specific subpart of large language models, which can do some really semantic, rich, meaningful queries in virtually all aspects of what you have in your data platform today. And the last part, it changes, not only how we work with data through generative AI and generating code, it also will drive, how we analyze data and how we think about it in a quite profound way, right? Because the problem of us humans is you only find what you're looking for, right? So, it's impossible for us to escape ourselves. But Gen AI models are really good at also reasoning and analyzing data and helping us, by showing us things which we are not looking for, by reasoning for us on our data. And again, I think that's going to unlock so many secrets that are buried in your data today.
The the power, I don't think a lot of people even understand how actually, I mean, the hype around Gen AI is large, no question about that. But actually, some of the ways we talk about it don't make a lot of sense, in my opinion. This is the theory that knowledge management people have been talking about for 30 years. And I got the rare moment where I got to show them the enterprise, Gen AI-based enterprise search from Gen App Builder in cloud. And I got to show them live what all of the Columbia University research libraries looked like in one chatbot. And they lost their minds. Like I've never seen academics jump around so much because they're not a very lively people, at least physically, but they lost their minds when they saw this. They were, wait, I can ask you this. And they really tried to push it. And I said, yeah, you've got a whole university that's, hundreds of years old, all in this. And I showed it to them, and it was like, I don't want to say one of them started crying, but it was close. Because it's pretty powerful. Now we can ask unstructured questions about unstructured data and get an answer in milliseconds, which is, I don't think we'd be able to say that for a long time.
Thank you. Ed, yeah, sorry. Go back here.
A lot of clicks.
This one, yeah.
The down.
I hate clicks.
Okay. And for the audience here, Ben, question for you is that if somebody wants to create a data-driven architecture, how do they get started with Gen AI deployments in the enterprise? What would your advice be?
Depends on your technical skill level. I definitely recommend playing around. Entry level is the generative AI studio. That's really, honestly, if you want to generate an image, you want to kind of just do some prompt engineering. It's literally a point-and-click interface. UI, super easy to get started. I've actually found I fell in love recently with our Cody models. I functionally stopped coding a couple years ago, and now I'm back thanks to this, which is kind of nice. But start with Generative AI Studio, and then there's Gen App Builder, which is basically really easily deployable search engine or chatbot. And then if you want to get really into the weeds, Vertex AI and the Palm models, for example, are available. But the biggest warning I would just say to people is have your data available somewhere. The worst part of my job, for example, and I get to build the rare kind of strange use cases for AI, which is really fun. But the worst thing about my job is that people say, I want to do this. I go, great. Do you have the data? And they don't have a good answer, or they've sort of not taken the raw ingredient very seriously. It's like saying, I'm the best chef in the world, and I have nothing in the cooler. I have nothing in the kitchen. I just have pots and pans. It's like, well, this is not going to. We need the raw ingredient, and I say to them, take it seriously because it's worth something. And that is like if you have the raw data, you can load it in GCP, and you can start building this stuff really, really quickly. Which is we designed it that way to make it up and running really quick.
Just to add to this, I think that's something really to sink in. In an AI world, your data is the most valuable and most differentiated asset that you have. So definitely you want to stock that rich.
And I've seen an interesting trend where companies who take their data very seriously, especially in a where they start building their own models, they start thinking like a product manager for not just for internal purposes. They take the first model they do, and then they make it available to their competitors for maybe free or maybe a low price. And then they use the newest model before, internally. So they always have a structural advantage. So they've got new revenue streams because they took their data seriously. They have new revenue streams coming in, and then they always have a competitive advantage. That was like, whoa, from the business perspective, I was like, that's super cool. And that was something only you can do if you sort of take your data seriously. And I think in the future we should, if we can have goodwill on financial and SEC filings, I think we should have, data strategy or data completeness as a factor that goes to, when it comes to publicly traded companies and things like that in an SEC filing. I think that's reasonable this day.
It's amazing. Yeah, I think so. Because as a CEO, when we are doing reportings at different levels, I can see how that makes a big difference both when you're operating a company as well as when you're making acquisitions.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like sometimes companies just get acquired just purely because of their data.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, it's got to be worth something.
And as a final wrap-up comment from my side is that when we were doing this projects together with Canoo, it's a complex program. You looked at how complex the platform is, and as Tony said, there's no room for error here in terms of execution. and both the 8 mile example, the first 8 minutes or 8 mile example?
First 8 miles.
First 8 mile example that Tony talked about. And so Onix and Google Cloud Consulting, along with the product management teams, we worked together to make sure that the experience that we were able to give Canoo was one which met Tony's extreme high standards. And I also want to thank my partners out here in the audience. We had Clearblade here also, which worked with us from an IoT edge. We had HashiCorp working with us on the Terraform scripting side, and a bunch of other partners as well. So I thank everybody for this accomplished program. So, and I also thank all the panelists. Give a round of applause to everybody. And I was absolutely inspired by what Tony shared. And I'm sure I invite all of you to go and see the actual vehicle. It is there in our booth here on about just 2 blocks down on the right-hand side. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.